Welcome to week 5 on Korean food and Korean diaspora. And today we will discuss the era of the 1980s to today. This covers nearly 40 years. And in this period, South Korea has globalized much more than before, and also economic growth. And this period also includes the economic hardship period of 1997, the Asian financial crisis. So what we will cover today is the 1980s. South Koreans saw some liberalization, and especially in economic terms, the government has controlled people's consumption until that time, and this has been gradually liberalized. So people could consume more, and food service industry started to develop much faster than before. And it was a time for globalization, and many Western fast food chains also arrived to South Korea in 1980s. And as you know, that South Korea is known as a republic of coffee today, and there are so many cafes and so on, so we will cover that part. And particularly we will cover 1997 financial crisis, when so many people were laid off and people saw their actual income went down. So how this had impact on the contemporary Korean culinary culture. And then we will also talk about KFC chicken, but not Kentucky Fried Chicken, but Korean Fried Chicken. So another KFC. And we will also look at the pizzas and shaved ice and so on, those food products that has been globalized by Koreanizing these Western or Japanese food. So the goals is that audience would have understood at the end of this lecture that how Korean diet and food industry changed and developed in this period over 4 decades. And also how South Koreans became more sophisticated in food consumption and paying more attention to quality of food rather than quantity of the food, which was the trend until 1970s. And also how South Koreans have gone through social and cultural changes during this period of so-called IMF, International Monetary Fund, caused by that 1997 Asian financial crisis. And also people would have understood how Western foods such as pizza and fried chicken have been Koreanized and gained global popularity. And also, lastly, the Hallyu's impact on Korean food and consumption in global market in the 21st century. Now, in our first session, we will talk about the early 1980s, the liberalization of consumption and changes in food service industry of the time. This period, 1980s, was important in South Korean actually political history and cultural and social history, because this was a time South Korea was still under the military dictatorship, but economically, based on the 2 decades of incessant economic growth in 1960s and 70s, by 1980s, people became much richer, and the society produced quite a significant layer of middle class. And this middle class would demand democratization, and by the end of 1980s, South Korea became full democracy. And also, because until 1970s, government tried to control people's consumption of rice, because the country didn't have enough rice produced. But by this time, already South Korea had more than enough rice, And actual consumption of rice itself has been declining because there were other food items available. And also, the share of income spent on food has been lowering, which means people had more disposable income to buy food and to spend on education and clothing and so on. So people became definitely much wealthier than before. And now this brought important changes in food consumption among Koreans in the 1980s. Now, let's look at the first liberalization policy of then government, so-called the Fourth Republic, which was built by military general Chun Doo-hwan, and politically it was oppressive. But probably because of that oppressive regime, the government tried to give people other channels through which they can relieve their stress. And the series of liberalization include adoption of professional baseball games in the early 1980s, and Korean students up to that point were wearing school uniforms, and now that uniform was liberalized. And also, these measures promoted more consumerism, and people pay attention more and spend more money on leisure, fashion, and food service industry. And in addition, also domestic tourism became more active. So within South Korea, people were traveling. And in this advertisement of 1981, you see that Korean airline promotes honeymoon trip to Jeju Island or Mountain Seorak or Gyeongju and Busan and so on. Now this was a significant development in terms of people's consumption. And because of this traveling, domestic travel, the regional particular cuisine came to be known better, and they also began to develop. As I said, people in this time gradually paid more attention to the quality of what they eat rather than the quantity. So people spent more money on quality fruits, vegetables, meat, and so on. And now this trend will continue in the next decade as well. So in this process, another important trend came, and that was the popularization of coffee in South Korea. And that's what we will cover in the second session of this week.